Hello again, IED students. Today I'm going to be giving you an overview of Activity 4.2 model creation. So the focus of this activity is to effectively use Inventor to create 3D models of a part. In order to do that, you have to be familiar with additive and subtractive modeling. Now, we covered this in the 4.2 presentation, and you should already have done an additive, subtractive, and combinational model. If you have not done those, please go back to that video and complete those files before beginning this activity. So this is just going to give you some independent practice to go through and practice your modeling methods. So the overall overview of the assignment is that there are three basic problems. The first one is right here. You'll notice that on all of these images down here at the bottom, it'll tell you what the measurement type is for, or the unit type is for our model. So this one is in inches. And then after you create that model, you have to explain what method you used. Did you use additive, subtractive, or a combination of the two? And why do you feel it was the most efficient? Same thing for problem 2, except problem 2 is in millimeters. So you're going to create a 3D model of the object shown and then use the most efficient method. And then you are going to describe why you think your method was the most efficient. Same thing with problem 3. Problem 3 is again in inches. This will look very familiar. You did create the shape as the combinational practice. However, these measurements are entirely different. There will be some of you who are very tempted to go back in and edit your sketches to be able to make this model work, so that way you don't have to redraw the whole thing. Word to the wise, that will take you longer than redrawing it. So you might just want to create a new IPT file and go from there. So you have 3 models, 2 questions for each. One is to create, the other is to reflect. So we're going to start with model number 1. So I'm going to pause here and give you a moment to get yourself prepared, open Inventor, and we'll start with problem 1. Hello again, IED students. We are going to take a look at problem 1 in activity 4.2. This shape right here is what we're working with. We're going to need to be in a standard inch IPT, and I'm actually going to start with a subtractive method. I'm going to create this whole cube, and then I'm just going to cut away some pieces, and then I'm going to use an additive method right here. So the overall size of this object is 2.5 by 2.5. So I'm going to come over to Inventor, and I'm going to choose New, English, Standard Inch IPT, and we're going to hit Create. I'm going to start a new sketch on the XY plane, and I'm just going to start with my rectangle. And I know that this guy is 2.5. I'm going to zoom out and recenter that. My overall length, if I look here, I've got 1 inch here, 2 here, and we can assume that's 1 inch over there since that's marked there. So that's a total of 4 inches. So I'm going to mark this as 4. We're going to finish the sketch, and we're going to use our home button to reorient, and I'm actually going to kick the extrusion that way just because I prefer it, and then we're going to extrude this to 2.5. So now I have this overall cube, and I'm going to start by going to the right face, or the front face of my object, and I'm going to cut away these little notches up top. Okay, so I know they're 1 inch wide and 1 inch tall. So I'm going to right click New Sketch, and I'm going to grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to start in the upper left corner, and I'm going to dimension this to 1 inch by 1 inch. Now I could do the other corner, but when I go to extrude, it's only going to select one surface for me to extrude probably. We'll give it a shot, but I'm betting I'm going to have to share the sketch then, so that way we can get both segments. If we're lucky, Inventor's going to let us pick what we want, but sometimes it gets a little cranky. So we're going to hit Finish Sketch, and I'm going to go to Extrude, and I'm going to change this to Cut, change my distance to All, and I'm going to select these 2 surfaces that worked exactly as I wanted it to. Again, if it gets finicky with you, don't worry about it. Extrude one area and then share the sketch, so that way you can then extrude the second part. But I've extruded these 2, so I'm going to hit OK. So now I have this upper portion of that model complete. Now the next thing I need is this lower cutout that we know is 3 wide. We can tell because this is 4 inches length in total, and these little notches are 0.5. So 0.5 plus 0.5 is 1. That gives us a total area of 3. So I'm going to right click on the front face and hit New Sketch. I'm going to then grab my rectangle tool, and I'm going to create a rectangle on that edge. I just hit the escape key because I wasn't on the edge. So I'm going to come in here. Now we're going to dimension this. The overall height of this is 0.5. And this distance is 3, and we know that the distance in between these edges needs to be 0.5. Okay, so once I have those 3 dimensions in place, I'm going to hit Finish Sketch. I'm going to go to my Extrude tool. I'm going to collect that surface. I'm going to hit Cut, change my distance to All because it goes all the way through, and then hit OK. So now the only feature that I have left to add is this cutout right here. So I'm going to create a new sketch on the right side of my model, and I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'm just going to draw a small rectangle right here on the side. Now I'm going to start dimensioning this. I'm going to dimension the size and then the placement. So this rectangle is 0.25 in thickness and 1.5 in length. So I'm going to grab right here. We're going to make that not 0.5, 0.25. And then we are going to make this 1.5 in length. Now I have to get this into the correct location. So this is 0.75 from the top and 0.5 from the edge. So I'm going to grab my dimensioning tool, go to the top line and the top edge here, make that 0.75. And then I'm going to go from this edge over here and identify that as 0.5. Okay, now that I have the size and the placement dimensioned, I'm going to hit Finish Sketch, and then I am going to grab my Extrude tool. I'm going to choose that surface, and my distance that I'm extruding is 0.75. So I'm going to change that to 0.75, and I'm going to click OK. So now I have this model completed for problem 1. I'm going to go to File and Save As. We are going to save this in our 4.2 folder. We're going to save it as 4_2. Problem 1, and then your last name, first initial, and I'm going to add the word video so I know it's for the video presentation. You should not add that part. I'm going to hit save, and then you should take a moment to put that file in the handed in folder. So go ahead and pause the video. The next section is going to focus on problem 2. Make sure you get that in the handed in folder, and we'll move on to problem 2. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at problem 2. Problem 2 is in millimeters, so it's a little bit different. Now, something I want to point out is this hole right here. We do not have any indication of how deep that hole goes, so we're actually just going to make it go through our model. And I am actually going to use completely subtractive for this one. So we are going to go into Autodesk Inventor, and we're going to go to New. We're going to go to Metric, and then standard millimeter IPT. If we try and create this model inside of an inch IPT, it's going to get real funny looking real fast. So we are going to click on Start New Sketch, choose the XY plane, and I'm going to look at my dimensions. And we have a 60 millimeter length. We have a total height of 40 millimeters and a 30 millimeter depth. So I'm going to start with a rectangle. And I'm going to start by dimensioning this to 60 millimeters by 40 millimeters. So I'm going to grab my dimensioning tool and type 60, zoom out and recenter, and 40. All right, I'm going to finish that sketch. I'm going to hit my home button to reorient my view. Now that reoriented a little bit differently than what I wanted it to. So I am just going to use my view cube to play around to rotate this back to where I wanted it. So I actually want it to be oriented like that. So now I'm going to go to extrude. And if I just realized it's upside down. And if I click the corner, it gives me that isometric view that we're used to seeing. So I'm going to bounce back over here. 30 millimeters is my depth. So I'm just going to type 30 and hit OK. So now I have the total size of this object. I'm now going to come in here and create a new sketch on the front view to create this cutout that I know is 15 long, and we know that our total length is 60, so we're just going to do a little math here to get that measurement. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to choose New Sketch, I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, I'm going to make sure it's up on that edge because I want it constrained there, and I know the total height is 15 to start. Now other known dimensions that I have, the distance is 10 on this side, So I'm going to go from here to here, and that is 10. On the other side, I know it's 25. So just to be sure, we're going to go here, here, 25. Okay, now by doing those dimensions, I actually don't need to dimension the length because I've already predetermined that. If I were to go and try and add this dimension, it's going to tell me it has to be a driven dimension. So by using the dimensions I had, I actually avoided doing math. So for my kiddos who really don't like adding and subtracting, you can just use the measurements you already have. So go ahead and hit Finish Sketch. We're going to grab Extrude, change it to Cut, and then select our area, change that distance to All, and then hit OK. So now I have that top chunk cut out of our total model, and I have to now create a sketch on the right side view to be able to put in that little hole right there. So I'm going to right click and choose New Sketch, and I'm going to grab my rectangle tool, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle on that surface, and I'm going to start dimensioning. I know that the distance between the edge of my rectangle and the side of it is 3 millimeters. The total length of my rectangle is 15, and the height is 10. And then it looks like I have a measurement that indicates that the distance between the bottom of my rectangle and the bottom of the model is 5 millimeters. So I'm going to start with the size of my rectangle and then go with the placement. So we're going to grab our dimensioning tool, and we're going to make this 15. We're going to make this 10, and then I'm going to come in here and dimension the bottom to 5 and the side to, I believe it's 3. It is 3. All right. Now, that is, let me double check. Yeah, that's all the dimensioning we need to do for that guy. So we're going to come back over here, finish our sketch, hit our Extrude tool. We're going to click, change it to Cut, and we're going to change that distance to All because we have no indication of how deep it actually goes. So we're just going to send it all the way through the model. And we're going to hit OK. So now that we've completed this model, you'll see we did that with only 3 extrusions and 3 sketches. So I would vote that subtractive is the way to go on that one. So we are going to go File, Save As. Make sure it's in your 4.2 folder. Again, it's 4_2, problem 2, and then your last name and your first initial. Again, I'm putting video on here so I know why I created this file. Do not add video to it. All right, so you are going to save this in your 4.2 folder and then pop it into the Handed In folder. So we're going to hit Save, and then that's going to, it reorients. Don't freak out about that. It's just the placement and where the extrusion went. It's not the end of the world. I can easily flip this around to take a look at it once I view it in the Handed In folder. So make sure that you go ahead and save that, pop that in the Handed In folder. We're going to take a little quick break here, and then we'll get started with problem 3. Okay guys, we are going to take a look at problem number 3, and I'm going to do a couple of things differently here. One, I'm going to use a combinational method because I've used subtractive in the last 2. I'm going to choose a different plane, and I'm going to sneak in a new tool for you to check out. So we're going to bump over to Inventor, and we're going to hit New, English, Standard Inch IPT, and hit Create. Now when I start this 2D sketch, I'm actually going to choose the YZ plane. We're going to mix it up a little bit. Because I'm going to create the L-shaped profile of this model and then extrude it in that direction. So to make that L shape, I'm actually going to use the rectangle tool. And I'm going to create 2 intersecting rectangles to make that L shape. Now I know some of you are looking at these lines going, Ms. B, how's that going to work? Well, we have this really cool tool called a trim tool in the Modify panel. And I'm going to hover over those interior lines, and it's just automatically going to make that L shape for me because I deleted those little snips, which totally awesome. I didn't have to use the line tool, way more convenient. So I'm going to dimension this L shape. I have it 3.5 inches long and 2.5 high. So let's go here, 3.5, zoom out and recenter, change that to 2.5. Sorry, I'm bouncing back and forth so much. I don't know these measurements as well as some of the other drawings. And then I have 1 inch, and then this is 1 inch across the top. And now that I have that, I have my profile. So now I'm going to finish sketch. I'm going to hit my home key to recenter this. And it does not give us an overall depth. So we have to do a little bit of math here. So we've got 1.5 plus 0.5 gives us 2. An additional 0.5 is 2.5. So I'm going to come in here, and we're going to choose extrude. I'm going to click this area. I'm going to change the direction as well so it matches my visual. And I'm going to choose 2.5 and we're going to hit OK. I can reorient that with my home key. And now I'm going to put my new sketch up here to do that subtractive portion. So I'm going to grab my rectangle tool and I'm again going to constrain it to that top line so that way it stays locked to that top edge. And then the depth on that is 0.5. Right here we have 1.5, and I think the distances between these two edges are 0.5. So I'm going to go here to here, change that to 0.5, and then this one, if I try and dimension it, is going to appear as a driven dimension. No big deal. So we're going to hit Finish Sketch. I'm going to choose Extrude. I'm going to click that area, change it to Cut, and change my distance to All, and then click OK. So that top portion is complete. Now I'm going to create the new sketch on this top edge down here. I'm going to just move that with the pan tool real quick, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to lock that in to the bottom edge there and constrain it so it doesn't move around on me. The thickness of this hole right here is 0.5. We can see that right there. So I'm going to come in here. We're going to dimension this to 0.5. The depth of it is 1.5. Alrighty, now my distance here is 1 inch. So I'm going to come here, click on this edge, change that to 1 inch. Awesome. So I'm going to finish the sketch. I'm going to extrude, select that area, change it to cut, and change my distance to all, and hit OK. So that's problem 3. So I'm going to hit File, Save As, and make sure we're in our 4.2 folder. And again, it's 4_2_ problem 3, your last name, first initial, I'm adding video, you are not, and you're hitting save. Okay, so that's all of 4.2. Make sure that these files get put into the handed in folder and that you answer those questions and submit your Word document.